Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the people in person and online. Today is the third panel of the Colloquium Mix series. We will be talking about addressing accessibility in immersive experience design. We will be exploring how universal design principles can be incorporated into experience design, the importance of prioritizing accessibility from early stages, and the evolution of tech and how this presents barriers and problems to designers and developers. So our main goal of today is to inspire all of you to prioritize accessibility from the early stages of development and to bring awareness to the ASU and mixed communities about accessibility. So before we begin, I'm gonna overview some words for you guys so you're aware of what we're talking about. The first is immersive experience design, which is the process of creating digital or physical realities that create a sense of being and creating a new reality or a realistic setting. It usually creates a feeling of being physically present in a non-physical world and involves storytelling, interaction, and sensory inputs. It incorporates the use of virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. From there, I'll address universal design, which is a design approach aimed at creating products, services, and experiences that can be accessed, used, and learned by anyone and all people, regardless of their ability or disability. So there are 7 design principles that you guys can see above. We will not be covering those right now, but if you want to talk about them in the Q&A, feel free to. Our last thing is disability personas or disability types. So we have a permanent disability, which is a long-term disability. This could include being blind, deaf, have low mobility, or you're nonverbal. The next is a temporary disability, which involves only having a disability for a short amount of time, a few weeks, a few months, or years. It could be you have an arm that's broken, so you only have one arm accessible to you. It could be that you have an ear infection and you can't really hear the environment around you. The last is a situational disability, which is only in your certain situation or environment. So this could be you're a new parent, you're holding your child, you only have one arm available to you. What do you do with that, and how can you interact with your environment? The next one is you're a bartender, you're in a loud environment, you can't hear anything. So how do you embrace that experience? How do you navigate your environment? But once you leave it, everything's fine. The last is a financial disability. So this could include not having the finances or access to certain experiences that others might have. So this could be you're at a school. Your school offers a VR experience or immersive experience, but another school doesn't, due to finances, due to accessibility, due to the access that the school might have. So from here, I'm gonna let the panelists introduce themselves. I'm Juliana Pujovic, I'm your moderator for today. I have a focus in XR development with a focus in UI design. Throughout my time at ASU, I have been interested in accessibility and making sure that all of these experiences are accessible and that everyone can use them. I just want to bring awareness to everyone here today and make sure that everyone understands what accessibility is and how it can be used. So I'm gonna let the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll go through questions, and each panelist will have the opportunity to answer a question. So Pranchi, do you want to begin?
Hi, my name is Pranchi Jindal and I am pursuing a master's in extended reality technologies. I'm a software engineer and an XR developer. So the reason I'm interested in this topic is with a background in software engineering, I have mostly focused on coding and technical solutions. However, through my recent projects, I have realized the importance of making sure that everybody can access and enjoy extended reality and immersive experiences. So I will be sharing my ideas and insights on how we can create XR spaces that are more inclusive and accessible for everybody.
Hello everyone, I'm Kirti Jain and I completed my bachelor's in architecture, during which I realized that the designing is not just in the physical realm, like it surpasses physical applications and into the extended world. And I was curious about learning more about being able to design virtual spaces, and that's why I'm here.
Hello everyone, my name is Yumeng. I'm currently first year graduate in XR program. My I got my bachelor and digital media art, focus on interactive design, and I worked on projects involving interactive installation and wearable design. And through this experience, I've really come to understand how users interact with technology. As an interactive designer, I've always been passionately about making sure that our work is accessible for everyone.
And my name is Marissa. I am a second year student in the Immersive Experience Design program here at ASU. My background is in speech therapy and UX design, so I've specifically worked with people who are neurodivergent or deaf or using sign language, and so that's why I'm super excited to be talking about accessibility today.
Cool. Okay. So I feel that as technology and users' needs have evolved, so has the definition of accessibility. So I want to understand from your guys' perspective, how do you define accessibility within the context of immersive design, and how might this differ from traditional accessibility? So Pranchi, you want to start it off?
Um, so when we talk about accessibility in immersive design, we are making sure that everybody, regardless of their abilities or backgrounds, is able to participate fully and comfortably. Unlike traditional approaches to accessibility that might involve adding ramps, screen readers, or physical aids, accessibility in immersive design has to focus on how do people interact with virtual environments. This could involve creating experiences that allow for different ways of interacting, such as gesture based navigation or voice commands or customizable content that respects diverse user needs. So immersive design in immersive design, accessibility should also feel natural and inclusive, not like an extra or a separate feature. This was something I learned during one of my personal projects, wherein I developed an augmented reality campus exploration app that focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion. The idea was simple: to create an app that provides information about on campus buildings and points of interest to visitors on campus, be it international students or people with different gender identities or those with accessibility requirements. The app was designed to provide useful information without making anybody feel singled out or labeled. However, in its first iteration, when the app was submitted to a conference, it was rejected because the reviewers found major design flaws that unintentionally showed bias. They noticed that the gender options were binary and the options for people with special needs were framed in a way that felt restrictive. For example, instead of grouping users as disabled or not disabled, it is more inclusive to ask if somebody would like to prefer stairs or elevators, or to give options for gender neutral spaces. So this was a real learning moment, showing how important it is to let users define their needs in flexible ways rather than setting rigid categories. So accessibility in immersive design goes beyond just meeting needs. It's about respecting people's identities and preferences. This means giving them the options and control so that they feel comfortable and included without being treated differently. It is about making everybody feel that they truly belong to the virtual or the augmented space.
So for me, accessibility by definition means something that is easily and effortlessly attainable. And in context of immersive design, I believe that accessibility should be addressed in terms of not just certain type of disabilities, like not just physical disabilities or visual disabilities. But the whole point is to be aware that there are multiple forms of disabilities, and it is not just black and white. It's not either this or that. But in today's time, there are a lot of different kind of disabilities, and addressing the comfort level of the users and just as designers, just being able to address it. The first step would be to acknowledge it and then address it, and then try to mitigate the problem through different settings. It could be some interface settings, some comfort level settings. And when you talk about accessibility, beyond disabilities, there are aspects such as economic differences. As designers and developers, we should at least try to create experiences that are available and accessible to people beyond physical and geographical boundaries, and people with all sort of financial backgrounds. Some people might not be able to have access to expensive gears and expensive headsets. So the whole point of it is how do we address the problem and how do we try to navigate around it. And yes, so when it comes to accessibility, there are a lot of aspects. There's the physical disabilities and other aspects such as geographical and financial disabilities. So as designers, we should be able to address them.
I think you guys have a good definition of accessibility in your own terms, and it's interesting to see, Pranchi, you brought up your own example and how that has affected you and the way you look at accessibility. I was wondering, you, May, Marissa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just piggyback her idea. In immersive experience, accessibility is about making sure everyone, regardless their physical, sensory, or cognitive ability, can fully engage with AR, VR, and XR. This goes beyond the traditional accessibility. It's about creating inclusive, immersive environments that use multimodal interactions such as voice comments, hand gesture, eye tracking, and haptic feedback. So everyone can participate in smoothly. And compared to traditional approaches, immersive accessibility is also focused on adaptability. Unlike making physical space more accessible, we need virtual environments more customizable. And XR also can offer users the accessibility to adjust the interaction layouts sensitivity, such as slowing down the movements and adjust the interactive layouts and to better suit users' needs.
Yeah, I think everyone has a really great example of what accessibility means to them, and just addressing these different personas of people who are deaf or hard of hearing, or who have a vision impairment, or who have a mobility impairment, or are neurodiverse or have a cognitive disability. And so I think you kind of hit it right on the head with being able to be customizable, because there are just so many different personas, so it's hard to kind of design for everybody. But if you are able to customize it, that's a huge, big deal. And then how it differs from traditional accessibility. When I think of traditional accessibility, I think of ADA guidelines and how we have like this standard for physical spaces. And I think this is a great starting point, but we can use it as a springboard, because in immersive experience design, we have so many more nuances. And kind of piggybacking off of what Pranchi said, with the questions for accessibility of, you don't want to necessarily say you have a mobility difference, but you want to say, I would like to use the elevator over the stairs. And that kind of hits on the point of accessibility and privacy, because not everybody wants to disclose, I have this disability or that disability. Maybe they just want to say, yeah, I want to use the elevator. And so that's how it may differ from traditional accessibility.
Great. I agree with a lot of the things you guys have said, and I'm wondering how can universal design principles be integrated into immersive experience design to create and help support accessibility for diverse users. Pranchi, do you want to start us?
In extended reality and immersive experiences, when we say we are designing inclusively, we mean we are creating spaces that work for everyone right from the very beginning. So instead of focusing what an average user might need, we are designing with the understanding that people have a wide range of needs, preferences, and the ways of interacting with the world. For example, we could offer multiple options for users to interact, such as hand gestures, eye tracking, or voice commands, so that each user can select what feels most comfortable and accessible. We also need to make sure that we allow users to adjust visuals and sound settings and things like that based on their preferences. So, it may include adjusting the text size, adjusting the colors, or even lowering the sound levels. This makes sure that the experience is adaptable to everybody without needing to adjust any separate specific settings. So, inclusive design is about creating interactions that feel natural and intuitive. For example, in a VR app, navigation should feel smooth and familiar, allowing users to jump right into the experience without struggling to figure things out. At the same time, it is essential to build in a room for error, that is the ways to undo actions or pause if needed, um, which makes the entire experience forgiving and supportive. So, all of these elements tied together create spaces where users feel confident and engaged and are able to explore and interact at their own pace without worry.
I think these are some major solutions and major points that she mentioned, which I'd like to mention again. Is like when we create an experience as designers, uh, it should not be a pushed experience to the user. Like it should not be like, okay, we've created this and we've had this option, and maybe you can pick from what's available. So instead of that, I think it would be nice to include the users in the process of designing, like a lot of prototyping and a lot of initial level feedbacks and like a lot of testing, so that we understand what the user need and the users are more in control of the experience and do not feel like we've pushed something upon them, and it does not feel like a forced experience. It's more seamless and organic. And yes, there are some tools that we can use, such as gesture-based inputs, like multiple levels of input. Like some people might not be able to use both their hands, or some people might not be able to like use even one hand properly. Like for example, how we got the Xbox adaptive joystick earlier this year. I think that's one interesting way to go about. Like you try to address and try to include all sort of people, and yeah, like I think these are some elements. Like again, the ability to adjust the contrast, or the having a very adaptive interface would be something that users might be comfortable with. So I think these points are really important when to keep in mind when we are designing.
I found it interesting how both of you, in some form or shape, were addressing inclusive design and the importance of that, and just how, as designers and developers, we should make experiences that are inclusive and can be used by everyone, and just not relying on our own feedback. So I'm wanting to know, you, May, Marissa, do you have an answer or some insight on this question?
Yeah, I agree with she mentioned the physical boundary, experience suffering geography and the physical boundary. I think one of the key way to do this is by integrating the feedback and the interaction patterns, which help user feel guided and confident where they interact with a complex environment. The first one is immediately feedback and multimodal feedback. By design environments where interacting elements have the first one when interacting with something in VR, AR, or XR, they need to know instantly whether their action or cognized. In a VR game, Beat Saber, when player slash a block with their saber, they immediately see the block slaps, hear a signal is the here or sound how and the vibration from the controller. And this confirms the action and help a player intuitively know if they were successful or if they need to adjust their actions. And another important aspect is predictable and consistent interaction patterns. By designing environments where interacting elements behave in predictable ways, user can more easily building an understanding. For example, like buttons, also appear in a same location, or all respond constantly to the same type of input. That's all.
Just making sure this is still on. Excuse me. Universal design principles, I think everyone kind of hit it on the head where we have, equitable design, flexible design, intuitive design. And this really makes me think of user experience design in general, where we have this one common goal of just kind of lowering cognitive load or the mental effort it takes to participate in these experiences. And it also makes me think of the NNG group, the Nelson Norman group for UX design. They have the idea of error recovery or error prevention. And it's interesting because, in website design, you have the ability to backspace or Control Z. And so that's pretty obvious, like error recovery or error prevention. And in VR even, if you are wearing a headset, you can just escape from that reality by taking off your headset at any time. But something that's different about immersive experience design specifically is if maybe you're in an art installation and you don't have a very clear way of preventing error or escaping that situation if you need to. And I'll just go into like an anecdotal story really quickly. Recently, I was at the Phoenix Art Museum, and there is this beautiful art installation where you go into a dark room, and there's beautiful twinkling lights and mirrors everywhere. But as soon as you go into it, the entrance closes, and then you don't exactly see the exit. And so that just creates different nuance with immersive experience design, where I can't Control Z, in real life. I can't backspace, and how do I get out of this room if I need to? And so these are just the different things with immersive experience design that we need to consider, and even if it's a big red exit sign that maybe detract from the experience, I think it's still really needed for accessibility in this instance.
Great. Marissa, I like how you had your own example, and it shows how you had to face this accessibility issue and just how, as designers, we could overcome this and think about new ways to address it. And it made me think about my own research I've been doing for this panel and how a lot of people with disabilities were saying that they look at, a lot of designers, developers look at these experiences and think of accessibility as a checklist rather than something that is needed by everyone. And just understanding how when projects or products aren't accessible, it makes people with disabilities feel excluded, feel frustrated, and just not having a fun time compared to people who have a higher level of ability, which leads us into our next question on why it's ethically important to prioritize accessibility from the early stages, and what tools or practices can best support an inclusive design process. So Pranchi, if you want to start us off.
So I think when we make immersive experiences accessible from the start, we are saying that everybody deserves to participate and enjoy these experiences. Overlooking accessibility can risk leaving people out, which may create feelings of exclusion and may even make extended reality spaces unsafe for some users. I had a relevant experience at a hackathon where my team and I planned to create a virtual reality experience. We decided to look at the accessibility requirements from the start and found surprising insights. For example, we learned that some people need options to adjust game speed because our reaction times slow down as we age, which makes it harder to process fast actions. Then we learned that all areas of interface should use the same input mechanism as the game itself. For example, if the gameplay is using the mouse, the menus should use it too. This may sound simple, but for people with limited mobility, switching devices can be a big challenge. One story that stood out to us was about an episode of Pokemon that aired in Japan in 1997. It had a red flickering sequence that caused over 600 children to be hospitalized due to epileptic seizures, even affecting kids who did not have epilepsy. So this showed us how careful we need to be with flashing images and colors, particularly red, to avoid triggering seizures. I feel a few tools and practices can help in this regard. First, user centered design that includes people from all abilities gives us a direct insight into what works and what does not. Then, testing early with diverse users help us catch issues before they become difficult or even costly to fix. Following guidelines like WCAG or using tools like Unity or Unreal Engine with their accessibility plugins can provide foundation for creating adaptable features like alternative inputs or customizable settings.
Yes, so I think something similar happened in the 2019 Venice Film Festival, where there was this experience that was designed in the virtual reality. And a lot of people complained not being able to navigate through it because of their physical limitations. So, yes, so as much as thought as we put in the conceptualization, storytelling, and creating a beautiful experience, it's also important to keep in mind inclusivity. And when we look the applications of extended realities beyond the point of entertainment and gaming, uh, over 80% of sectors in over 80% of companies in sectors like manufacturing, retail, training, and education have shown inclination towards adapting XR. So this would mean that our responsibility as creators and designers increases to create a very dignified and inclusive design, because because we all know that these sectors are major and very essential in forming economical and social background of any country. So when we create experiences that might exclude certain or is difficult to navigate for certain users and people, it'll probably, we are at the risk of losing the particular crowd. We might end up discouraging them, and it might raise further questions with self-efficacy and importance. And so I think it's of key importance that we create experiences from early stage. Like, these are the foundational years of this field. And so it's like, if we create a strong foundation, of course we'll have something nice to shoot off to, like, in the coming years. So it'll become easier for the following designers and the experiences to be more inclusive. So yes, like, there are certain tools, like how she mentioned, that there are plugins for real-time subtitles and real-time captioning, and with limited hand gestures. So all of these tools, I think, as students, as designers, it's important for us to explore and be a part of the whole R&D process, to be able to figure out what works and what doesn't, and so we can just form a more inclusive environment.
Pranchi, I like that you brought up another example of things, and both of you had your own examples on how products in the past have not addressed accessibility, and just how, as designers, we can see these problems and address them head on and come up with our own solutions. And these plugins you're talking about, I've looked into them. I think they're interesting, and it's a good start for us to look into as people in immersive experience design. I was wondering, Yumeng, Marissa, do you have anything else to add or any insights?
Yes, priority the accessibility from the early stage of experience design is ethically important. If we overlook the accessibility at the beginning, we risk creating the experience that excludes people, reinforce the social barriers and limited access with disabilities. It's about recognize that everyone deserves the same levels of engagement, and make sure no one is left behind the digital world. Um, I think a collaborate workshop with a stakeholder and including accessibility advocates and youth with disabilities can help bring diverse perspective into the brainstorming processing. And these collaborating environments foster creative and inclusive thinking, ensuring that accessibility is considered a priority rather than a mere checkbox.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Yuming. And for me, this ethical, question here brings me to two words: is just social responsibility. I think we have a social responsibility to integrate accessibility into our immersive experience designs, and to do this early and from the start is to care about people. And I think if we don't do it from the start, if we try to tack it on at the end and retrofit these accessibility features onto something that's already existing, I think it's going to be pretty obvious to our users that this was an afterthought. And also, it's pretty expensive to have to do that if you already have code that's in place, and then to try to fit accessibility onto that gets expensive, both from like a monetary perspective, but also from a brand loyalty perspective. I think these days a lot of people are not so focused on just what the product is, but they're also focused on like the mission and who the CEO is. And I mean, we have social media these days, so we can see like what the CEO has to say, and we want to make sure that like their values align with ours. But I think if you're not going to do it from an ethical perspective, you should probably do it from a profitability perspective. Which, I don't know, it sounds kind of bad, but it's so true. There's a huge population of people who are disabled. I think it's 16.1 billion people worldwide, which is 16% of the population. So if you're not going to design for that population, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. What else? Sorry, I just get like very, passionate about this because you're going to be excluding people if you're not designing for these people, but also, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to innovate just in general. And so I think our best tool for this is storytelling. We have, user experience research like we've all mentioned. And it's one thing to say that we have, someone that is deaf that needs subtitles, but it's another thing to say, we have this specific person who, has a specific need. And if, back to Yuming's point about getting a workshop with the stakeholders, this is huge. And I think this is the big difference between academia and maybe corporate, is that a lot of times in the corporate world, we have stakeholders who are saying, we need to launch this product and we need to launch it now, and they don't want to care about accessibility. And so what do you do in that instance where you're like, I just need user research. I need one day to talk to users, and they say, we don't really care. Slap some subtitles on there and let's, get it going. But if you use storytelling, you could say, hey, we have this person. Maybe you're, developing a VR app that is maybe an aquarium or something for fifth graders. And you no longer say, hey, we need subtitles for, someone who's deaf. You could say, hey, Mary in fifth grade needs subtitles because she wants to be a marine biologist when she's older. And then the stakeholders now maybe have a heart and like some empathy, and they're not just like, okay, we need to launch this by end of the week. Maybe they'll be like, okay, we'll give you an extra week to, design for Mary. And so storytelling is probably our best asset in this instance.
I think it's interesting, Marissa, how you brought up creating these personas and making empathy a big, important part of accessibility for stakeholders, because they do tend to overlook it. And it's interesting to see how if we make these personalized experiences more important to stakeholders and the people creating it, we can bring awareness and make them more aware that it's important for you to prioritize accessibility. It's important that we address what users need at the beginning stages instead of the end. And I just think collaboration with the stakeholders, with the designers, with the developers, with the actual users is an important thing. And having the people with disabilities or varying levels of disabilities in meetings in the beginning stages of development is an important thing that we should be thinking about and just moving forward with. Our last question of today's panel is, as immersive technologies evolve, what solutions can designers, developers, people within this community come up with to address challenges and barriers to accessibility? So Pranshi, if you want to start us off.
So I'd like to begin with addressing a few barriers. I believe one of the biggest barriers to XR accessibility is that immersive tech is constantly evolving, which may leave certain people behind. For example, complex interactions or detailed visuals, which may seem exciting to some, may be overwhelming or even unusable for people with sensory or cognitive disabilities. Another barrier is the lack of standardization across XR platforms, which makes it hard to create a universally accessible experience. Then I feel some VR headsets require players to be in a particular physical position to be able to play the game or perform some action. I strongly believe that there should always be the ability to remap these physical positions to other controls. Then sound design needs particular attention, um, and can be critical for a good user experience for people with disabilities, because auditory experience of a game or an immersive environment could be the experience for such users. So to address these challenges, designers can focus on solutions that bring flexibility and customization. For example, offering options to adjust the visuals and sound settings can allow users to tailor the experience based on their needs. Following universal design principles ensures that the experience is not just accessible but also naturally adaptable for everybody.
The most obvious barriers that we have established so far is like all that is mentioned so far. So when we talk about solutions, I think there's no one solution fits all approach to these barriers, but as designers and as students, what we can try, according to me, is have a platform, a collaborative platform where people can co-design. Like I mentioned earlier, like I'm sitting here, but I might not know. I'm talking about the disabilities, but I'm sure that there are so many disabilities that I am missing out on. There's so many latest researches that I might not be aware of, and not all of us would be aware of at all point. So creating a space or creating a standard guide, I wouldn't call it a standard guideline, but at least a platform where I can put in my inputs and I can see what designers and users from all across are, what are the issues that they are facing and what was tried already and what worked and what didn't work. sort of create an empathy map to at least get an idea, or at least try to anticipate of what reaction might be generated due to what issues and what barriers could be faced by the people. And apart from this, I think the very powerful tool that all of us have, and designers and users and developers have, is the ability to question and the space to question. And luckily we do have people and experts in the field who can provide us with some answers, or at least push us in the right direction. So it's very important for us to always be curious and ask the right questions and try to figure out what the solution could be. And when I was doing my research for this panel, I came across a few interesting things like empathy mapping, and there's already VR tunneling pro that helps users mitigate through motion sickness, where the visuals are focused and the periphery is blurred out, so the person does not feel overwhelmed while navigating through the experience. Apart from this, like HoloLens and Magic Leap is already doing depth sensors and making use of spatial audios, and using NPL for people to be able to interact in the virtual world using voice commands. So things like these, plugins like these, make it a little bit easier. It might not solve the entire issue, but it does make it easier for the user to navigate. And it is also very important to know that we might not be able to come up with a solution or an experience that best fits everyone. So incorporating features where the user is aware that they can, maybe skip like this certain portion in the experience, which the user might not be comfortable or might not be able to navigate through it. So at least the user is aware that we can skip it, like if not go through it, instead of just quitting the experience. So quitting would not be an option. Maybe they can skip it and move past it. So things like that are of key importance. And like trying to understand the limitations, trying to mitigate them, and trying to anticipate what could be and what couldn't is important.
Yeah, I think you guys hit on a lot of the really main barriers for this. And when I was first thinking about this question, I was thinking, we need more guidelines. We have things like XRA, the XR Association, who, it's a group of people who are working to get these accessibility guidelines up and running. But then when we were doing our research, we came across Christopher Patno, I believe his name is, and he's the head of accessibility at Google. And then he kind of differentiated between having guidelines and having best practices. And his concern is that if we have guidelines, everyone's going to just build for the bare minimum of, here are the checkboxes that we need to check off, versus best practices of here's what other people are doing, take that into consideration, but also build upon it. And so he thinks that having best practices is going to kind of amplify this idea of competitiveness within accessibility. And I think that's really cool. It's like Pranchi said, where it's so emerging that we can't necessarily do a one-size-fits-all guideline at the moment. But what we can do is we can have this sense of competitiveness with who can design, the best innovative solution for these different populations. And one thing that, came up for me was I believe it's Alchemy, is doing this really well. Is they're doing human-centered design with their accessibility in XR. They have a game where they're paying special attention to people who are colorblind. So they're not just matching colors in their games, they're matching colors and patterns. So if people can't see the specific color, they can identify the patterns. And I think that was a really cool example of people who are, taking a problem and coming up with an innovative solution for it, based on, their user feedback and, just kind of being competitive with their accessibility, not just saying okay, these colors pass these guidelines. It's how can we, keep on building upon that. So in general, just kind of being competitive with accessibility, but also having this awareness more talks, and then more interdisciplinary teams, I think will really benefit this area, especially as it is emerging.
I think it's interesting because I looked into that too in Google and how they are stepping away from calling it barriers because I found a lot of companies, solutions and guidelines. I found a lot of companies creating these guidelines and understanding that these are the bare minimum that you have to fill out to be able to get your application pushed. I think Oculus has these virtual reality checks that they do, and I was looking at them, and it's just making sure you have some captions, you have the bare minimum. So I'm interested to see how, if you guys have any things on like how we can step away from just addressing these bare minimums and come up with better ideas, and if that's a designer's job, if it's a developer's job, or what do you guys think, if you have anything on this?
I think the biggest thing is, it goes back to our third question of early, integration with accessibility. I think it's a developer's problem, I guess I won't say problem, I'll say opportunity. I think it's a designer's opportunity. I think it's the opportunity of people who have disabilities to come into these rooms and start these conversations. And yeah, there isn't going to be a one size fits all. So kind of getting everyone in the room and coming up with a solution, I think, is going to really benefit this.
Does anyone else? It's okay if you guys don't. Okay, something we can talk about further. To close out our panel, we have a final thought for all of you. So in ASU's statement, it says ASU is measured not by whom it excludes, but by whom it includes and how they succeed. I just want you guys to think about this. We're all in this field, this great field that's evolving, that's changing, and how can we as designers, as developers, as just creators in ASU's community, in Mix's community, in the broader Arizona community, how can you guys think about accessibility in your everyday lives? How can you address how I'm creating this product? How can I make it more accessible for the people who are using it, and just creating a place where everyone feels welcomed, because we don't want to exclude anyone. We're new to this environment. We're creating the next steps for it and how it's going to be emerging, how these emerging technologies are going to be. So that's just something our panelists wanted to bring awareness to. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, but just something for the audience and the people online to think about. We're going to move forward with our Q&A. So if anyone has questions, now is the time to ask them. And I'll leave up our panelists' names if you guys want to address one of us specifically, and then if Suraj could help us out with this. So any questions from the audience?
Hello, we have a question from an audience member on our live stream. So an audience member, Interconnect 3D, pointed out that the Instagram format can sometimes be challenging from an accessibility perspective. Could you share if there are any initiatives within the program to enhance the accessibility of media content produced here?
Does anyone have an answer? I'm just gonna, Marissa, you
Is our follow-up questions to a question allowed? We're talking about Instagram, right? So
Yes.
More of like a 2D platform.
I believe it's from a social media platform, 2D ideas that you all have. That's how I interpreted the question.
Okay. And then we're talking about how to make Instagram or social media more accessible, correct?
Correct, yes.
This is interesting because, I think Instagram is typically viewed as a 2D experience, but I would argue that it's a pretty immersive experience if, if we're defining immersiveness as, really gaining your attention. I would say Instagram does that really well, and maybe a little too well. To make it more accessible, that's such a hard question because we talked about all these different personas, and we have, the persona of people who are deaf or hard of hearing, people who need vision assistance, people who have mobility assistance. So my question would be, In what aspect? I think there are ways where Instagram is making it more accessible, where maybe take it from a mobility perspective. If you're unable to maybe use your fine motor skills to swipe up or swipe over or double tap. I do think they're taking this into consideration where, double tap is an option, but you can also tap the heart. Something that they could do to enhance this for mobility is maybe making larger touch spaces. I think the standard right now for material design is 48 by 48 pixels as a touch space, but maybe this exists and I don't know about it. Maybe there's a feature where you can customize the touch spaces, but if it doesn't exist, a mobility solution would be maybe larger hearts, larger send button, larger comment box, and that's just from a mobility perspective. I'm sure there are different solutions possible for vision, hard of hearing. They have subtitles now, which is great. Yeah, yeah, broad question, but I
Thank
love
you.
it. Yeah.
Are there any, in terms of standardization, and when you mentioned that, are there any processes, tools, or workflows that you would take from your existing disciplines? I know some of you are UX, that could be applied as standardizations in XR design.
I focus a lot on UI design from websites, immersive experience design, VR, and I think just starting from early stages, so having like your ideation and having, instead of just the designers coming up with the solutions, actually having like a streamlined process where you do testing and a bunch of user testing is what I found is like the most important thing to make sure things are accessible. I use a lot of accessibility checkers online, which aren't made for XR right now, but they have the benefits to understand traditional accessibility and those standards and how we can add them to XR or just immersive experiences. XR is extended realities for people who don't know what that means. And I think just coming up with, can you rephrase your question again, just so I remember? To make sure I address it.
From your existing, from the disciplines that you come from,
Yes.
that you've come from into XR, what are some existing processes in your pipeline design process, anything like that that could be standardized in XR?
I think a lot of UI design, a lot of website design, you make prototypes, you make wireframes, you do all that. I think adding that is a good standardized thing, and then user testing that over and over again, because as designers, you think your product is great. You look at it, you're like, this is the best thing I've ever made. It might not work for one of our panelists. It might not work for someone in the audience. So having that opportunity to be able to test and actually see what they think is the most important part, and starting from the beginning, so you come up with your first iteration. You think it looks good. It doesn't have to have color. It doesn't have to have the best design, but seeing how that works, putting it out there, having a user test it, getting their feedback and iterating off of that, I think is something that XR can really take and like use, because that's something we do in UI UX design, and just creating these personas, creating these opportunities to understand our audiences and actually having them be a part of it is something I think is important. From my own background, I don't know if anyone else on the panel has a different idea, because we're all from a different background.
So from the point of architecture design, like when we try to create space, we try to make sure that there are a lot of navigational cues, and ease of navigation is given a lot of importance, and like given seamless designs, and being able to get into from one space to another space without feeling overwhelmed or without a sudden change. And there has to be an organic flow of spaces. So that is something which I feel can be directly integrated from physical design to the extended realities. And apart from that, there's certain design principles which I think is universal across like all design fields, is like having like right balance and then right contrast, and things like that are, I think, pretty generalized. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. My background is in speech therapy, so working with individuals who are neurodivergent or deaf or using sign language or nonverbal, and also people with epilepsy. So, a specific guideline or standard for those with epilepsy is to not have like the lights flashing frequency over 3 hertz. That's an example. And then also, for those who are deaf or low vision, just having a multi sensory kind of experience. So making sure that if you do have text, you also have audio cues, or if you have, audio, you have text associated with it, or haptic feedback. Haptic feedback is, a huge one that could be a huge asset. And then, lastly, touching on the topic of neurodiversity, it's such a broad spectrum. So I don't know if there will be guidelines for those who are neurodiverse, just because it's just a large spectrum of, people who want more input or less input or more motion or less motion. And so I don't know. I don't know if there'll ever be anything for that. That'll be interesting.
One more question, if there's any online. I think there's one more online.
We have one more question from someone from our live Q&A. From Maker Comet, how do you find or engage disabled play testers for your app or game? Are there forums or resources that you regularly interact with or engage with?
So I can talk about this with reference to an application that I made. So it was about addressing dyslexia. The app's motive was to help dyslexic students in their education and their learning. So, like I said, with my background in software engineering, I programmed the app. It was fully functional, but yeah, it missed accessibility features, and so after like talking to some of the people, I came across this fact that I can for actually performing the usability testing of my application and to incorporate accessibility features into it, I could actually reach out to ASU's medical school, where they would be able to direct me to either dyslexic students or resources that are connected to organization that host such students. So I think if there is no particular forum directly available on the internet that can help you find your particular target user base, you can always find the user base through word of mouth. So yeah.
I'm gonna add on to that, unless one of the panelists have things to say. Okay. For my own research for this panel and just in general, I found that a lot of resources and good resources are actually reaching out to communities who are disabled or have different levels of disability, because they're interested in helping impact our progress and seeing products are actually made for them. So just reaching out to them and finding there's a bunch of communities out there and there's a bunch of people who would be willing. You just have to reach out. And I know that can be scary, but I think it's like a great step to actually have them be a part of your experience and understand their point of view instead of just filling out a forum online, because that doesn't allow you to get to know the people or introduce yourselves to them and let them understand who you are. There's like a bunch of research on that and like a bunch of the podcasts we've been watching and videos that introduce that topic. If you want me to go further, I can, but I think Marissa has something.
Yeah, those are great. And I also think we could take a page from the Mix Center's book. We have a community, what's it called? Like a community outreach? Is that what it's called? The group of people who are part of Mesa who, come together and, make Mix what it is and give input. And I think there's a huge opportunity to have that for people with disabilities too, for the things that we're creating in this building. It'd be awesome to have like a group of people in the community kind of giving their feedback in terms of disability.
Any more questions? I think we're reaching time. No, we still got time? Okay. Any more questions online, in person?
Hi. Excellent panel. This topic, I believe, is extremely important, and we should, as designers, we should keep accessibility always in our mind while we're designing. And I'm wondering, are you familiar with the term crypt technoscience? Any of you? No. So this was a term coined by disabled people with disabilities in UC Berkeley in the 60s. And part of what they claim is the importance of how valuable is the knowledge of a designer with disabilities from the designer point of view. And I'm wondering if you have ever collaborated with a designer or an artist that it was disabled, and what was your feedback, or how did it, if there's anything that you learned in the project, or if you haven't, if you have considered or will consider for your final projects or other projects that you're doing here, a collaboration in those terms. And if you would like to, there's like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Leonardo, the International Society of the Art, Science, and Technology, which is an organization that's been supporting our field since the late 60s, and now ASU owns it. And they have a program called the Crypt Tech Incubator, where they support designers and artists with disabilities, and as to continue and how would I say, enhance the design field from a disability point of view. And I encourage you, if you're interested, to reach out to Leonardo and see if there's ways that you can collaborate.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I have not knowingly, I think, collaborated with an artist who is disabled, but I plan to, for my applied project, work with those who are paralyzed, and I want to make sure that I'm not guessing what their needs are. I want to make sure I do both observational research and survey and interview research to make sure that I am solving a real problem and not a problem that I've created in my head. And then thank you for those resources as well. Wrote that down. Anyone else?
I also haven't, but I'm interested in working with people with disabilities and better understanding their needs, because I work for XR. I do a lot of things in that, and I want to better understand how we can help them. We focus a lot in the projects I worked on creating accessible user interfaces, because that's my focus. But we've never actually tested with people with disabilities, and I would love to hear their feedback and better understand their needs. And I would like to thank Anna for those resources, because I kind of want to use them for my applied project and better understand how I can tie in actual communities instead of just guessing. Because as a designer, I think we do a lot of guesswork. As developers, we do a lot of guesswork. So it's better to have the opportunity to actually work with people and get their insight instead of just going in and not knowing what their needs are and then putting out a product. I don't know if anyone else has anything or any other questions from the audience. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for attending online, in person, This is just an opening to accessibility. It's a broad topic. Me, Marissa, and the rest of them, Pranchi, Yumeng, and oh my God, why am I Kirti? Sorry, long day. Have been interested in accessibility, and we'd love to further talk about it with you guys. So if you're interested, come up to us at the end or message us. All of our information is there. This is just the start, and we'd love to further develop this and better understand all of your guys' interests in accessibility. So thank you everyone for being here today.